Afternoon.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for being here. We've had a wonderful session this morning and found out all kinds of fascinating things, really interesting. They're all off the record, so I can't tell you a thing. But if you ask the right questions, yeah, there you go. But seriously, we are absolutely thrilled to have with us today former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Paul Ryan. This is part of the Center for Politics series on National Symposium on Democracy, which is a topic everybody is discussing these days. Paul Ryan was the 54th Speaker of the U.S. House in office from October 2015 to January 2019. He was the youngest Speaker in nearly 150 years, and I believe, look at this, I believe it. I believe it.
I'm de-aging now, actually.
Yeah, he said there was a decompression period after leaving, and he lost several years of stress, and I don't blame him for that. We also remember that in 2012, he was selected as Mitt Romney's vice presidential nominee. Speaker Ryan was first elected to Congress, this is going to encourage students, at age 28. Of course, they think that's old, but still, that's pretty young, so you all can do this too. You can get in there early. He represented Wisconsin's 1st district for 2 decades. Before then, he was a staffer for Senator Bob Caston of Wisconsin, so that's another reason for you to get involved at the staff level. He also was a speechwriter for Jack Kemp, who, in my book, is one of the greatest Republicans of the 20th century. Wonderful guy. The Republican vice presidential candidate with Bob Dole in 1996. And he was a legislative director for U.S. Congressman Sam Brownback of Kansas, who later went on to be governor for a couple of terms in Kansas. Speaker Ryan currently resides near his childhood home in Janesville, Wisconsin, with his wife and their 3 children, who are getting to be college age. And I did my best to push the University of Virginia, but I don't know if it had any effect at all. So don't hold it against me.
I wore my orange tie.
Yes, well, I was just going to mention that. He actually brought this tie and changed into it before coming over. I told him he really ought to go into politics. That was a good instinct for anybody who's in politics. He holds a degree in economics and political science from Miami University in Ohio. See, that it's not totally useless. You can actually apply it, maybe get elected to something. I also want to mention that you are now teaching at Notre Dame, and to be honest, most of his classes are on the same days as football games, I believe.
The day before.
Day before.
Yeah, the day before
okay,
of home games.
Wonderful,
Right, yeah.
wonderful. But it has no connection whatsoever. But they're very lucky. He does a lot of guest lecturing and classes all in various departments at Notre Dame, in addition to teaching his own class, and I'm sure it's extremely popular. So first, let me ask for an ovation. Give a warm Virginia welcome to Speaker Ryan.
Thank you.
Let me tell you quickly how we're going to do the program today, and I didn't determine this. If you're unhappy with it, the staffers are in the back. They're the ones that raise your hands so that they know not to come to me. Instead of a speech, and we encourage this, Speaker Ryan preferred to answer questions. So we collected questions mainly from students, many of you here in the audience, in advance of today's event, and we're going to get to as many of them as possible. I want to use my moderator's option here and just pose one question to you.
So these are mostly your questions?
No.
One
Just
or two students' questions?
No,
just kidding.
Well, I changed some of them, but other than that, no. In your favor, by the way, so you should be grateful for that. Back when you were Speaker, Donald Trump occasionally attacked you on Twitter. Given your experience, what advice would you give someone who's attacked by President Trump on Twitter? And I'm asking for a friend. I'm asking for a friend. What?
Well, first of all, it's nice to be here. I've always wanted to walk. I've never been in this building before. I've driven by here, but so it's just, for me, just as an American citizen, it's a really cool thing to see. So thank you for having me. I guess the question is, who would that friend be? If it's a person with $54 billion, then I'd hire thousands of Californians to work on Twitter for my behalf to do responses.
Yes.
But if you're not that person, let it roll off your back. Look, I don't know how many times every now and then I felt, mostly we kept our disagreements private. which was constructive. But every great now and then I felt the need as a leader to do that publicly. There was an event in this town some time ago where I just felt the need to say something. And he's a counterpuncher. And so when he counterpunches, he's going to counterpunch. And it is what it is. I sort of shrug my shoulder, move on. That's what I would recommend.
That's, I think,
roll off your back.
That is a great recommendation. I can't wait to give it to my friend. And the other good thing is, in a given day, there'll be 20 other people.
It's good. Yeah, just wait 10 minutes.
Just wait 10 minutes. Yeah, it doesn't matter. All right, let's get on to politics here. I mean, you're really into government, so I'm going to skip all of that. I'm going to go straight to the politics. I'm kidding. We'll get back to government. I know you haven't missed a minute of the umpteen Democratic presidential debates. You've probably had them taped and rewatched them.
I have watched highlights. I can give you that.
You watched what?
I've watched some of the highlights.
The highlights. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good enough. You're not in office anymore. Now, looking at this field of Democrats, the ones who are actually left, how do you size it up? Of them, which one would be easiest for Trump to beat? And which one would be the most difficult for Trump to beat?
Well, first of all, I think he's clearly the favorite, whoever he runs up against. As an American, frankly, and look, I'm a conservative, so everybody knows my story. As an American, it's kind of scary to me that Bernie Sanders could be the nominee of the other major party in this country, a socialist. That's, to me, kind of scary. As a Republican, as a former leader in charge of electing House Republicans, I love the idea of a Sanders candidacy. I mean, the down ballot, it gets me excited about the down ballot. I feel like we'd have a pretty good shot at the House, pad our majority in the Senate. We'd have a good shot at getting the House back. We lost our House, you know this, but we lost it basically in the suburbs.
Right.
And so Bernie, who's the front runner, I've known Bernie for, 20 years, something like that. I think he'd be great to run against. And I think it'd be probably like a Nixon-McGovern kind of race in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, so who the other ones are, like I said, I think President Trump's, I think he's the likely candidate and the likely winner no matter who he's running against. I think it's gotten to the point where the economy is so good, the numbers are so good, they will run a personality contest against him because I don't think you can make a really compelling point or a case against an incumbent when you have unemployment the lowest since 1969, record levels of unemployment, low unemployment for African Americans, for Hispanics, for Asians, job creation, wage growth for the bottom deciles, meaning for the lower income workers, is faster than everybody else, and all of it is higher than inflation, so living standards are rising. So a lot of good things. It's a dream environment as an incumbent to run on. So they'll run a personality contest against him in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Those are probably the new key swing states. You know this stuff better than I do. And being a Wisconsin, the one thing I feel like I can speak a little bit authoritatively is on Wisconsin politics. Yes. One of these progressives, we can beat a progressive, I wouldn't say easily, but much more easily than, say, a person in the moderate lane. So the moderate lane it's going to come down to the suburban voter in what we call our WOW counties. My old district, Jim Sensenbrenner's district, that's the voter, and it's probably the same in Michigan and Pennsylvania. That the rural Trump voter is locked down, core part of the Trump base, which is kind of a flip. It's Reagan Democrats, then they voted Democrat for a long time, and then they're back to voting for Trump. It's that suburban voter where, not in Wisconsin's case, but in a lot of the country, we lost our congressional districts. That suburban voter is the swing voter, and that suburban voter is not going to vote for a hardcore progressive. That's just too scary to them. So that's going to be the up for grab voter if there is going to be one. Like I said, I think the president's in pretty good shape relative to his competitors.
What's amazing is that Democrats, at least a lot of them, and there's some of them in this room, can't apparently recognize the obvious about Bernie Sanders. It reminds me of McGovern.
I was in charge of 2 cycles for the House Republicans, keeping a majority, preserving our majority. It would be great. I mean, for us on the down ballot, it would really help us pick up our suburban seats back.
Well, it may happen. We'll have to see. And I say that, I have a personal perspective too. You have Wisconsin, and when I was an undergraduate here, I worked for the McGovern campaign, and I helped us win Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. It was a wonderful year. That's when I got my baptism and
Yeah.
started to figure out A, B, C, D.
Right.
Anyway, there was a poll, Quinnipiac had a poll, I think 2 or 3 days ago, on just Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And Michigan was very close.
Yeah, I think he had a pretty good lead in Wisconsin, if I'm not
He had a
mistaken.
big
Yeah.
lead in Wisconsin, and Democrats were leading in Pennsylvania. They probably have to win all 3, or
Right.
at least 2 of the 3 to win. Does that seem right to you?
It does.
That Wisconsin would be more Republican?
Personally, nothing against Quinnipiac. I don't know the methodology. The Marquette polls are pretty good in Wisconsin. Marquette University has what I would call pretty clean polls because they scrub them pretty well. And the last Marquette poll had Trump leading everybody. So when I see the Quinnipiac poll backing up the Marquette poll, that looks pretty good to me. That looks, meaning as far as an accurate indicator. And so I didn't look at the crosstabs in the Quinnipiac or even the head-to-heads, but my guess is he's got a much bigger lead on the progressives and probably a narrower lead on the moderate. It's a relative term. I don't think they're moderate, but on the people in the moderate lane.
Of the moderates, and I assume at least 3 of the 5 or 6 that are still credible candidates could be classified as moderates. In your view, and maybe focus specifically on Bloomberg versus Biden, which one do you believe would be the stronger?
Well, I've been quoted for saying this. I have believed Joe, but I don't think he's going to get the nomination. The reason I say Joe is for a couple points. He has a history of being able to get blue collar appeal, so maybe he can eat into the blue collar base, and to that suburban swing voter, which this is like the core of my district. We didn't used to consider this voter a swing voter, but it has kind of become the new swing voter. They don't see him as gonna. He's not going to ruin the country. He's not going to go. They're more conservative than Joe Biden, but they see Joe Biden a little bit more or less as harmless, probably a one-termer, and I think they see Joe as a known quantity, nice person. That's why I say in the moderate lane, Joe. Michael Bloomberg's untested. Michael Bloomberg, I don't see him having any chance of eating into a blue-collar base. And I just don't think he's as personally appealing as Joe probably is seen. So I would put Joe ahead of Bloomberg in my mind's eye, just for voter profile. But I don't think Joe's going to get it. We'll see. Bloomberg kind of laid an egg the other day, that's for sure. So we'll see. Look, you're actually a Republican to handicap this stuff.
Well, but you have the better perspective. A lot of Democrats, I think, have misinterpreted the debate, but I think you're right on all those things.
Yeah, but I think Trump beats both of them in Wisconsin, frankly.
And if he beats him in Wisconsin, he's halfway home, or more than halfway home. On the Republican side, every now and then, there's a rumor that trickles through Twitter and Facebook.
Oh, they're always true.
Yeah.
Yeah, every one of them.
Especially the videos.
Yeah.
You can't manufacture a video. I'm kidding. That Mike Pence will be dropped from the ticket, that this is what Trump will dangle in the summer, or at least make it appear as though Pence isn't secure. Do you believe that or not believe it?
No, I don't believe it. Mike's a good friend of mine, just full disclosure. We served in the House together. Look, I have no insight. I can't tell you any color on this thing, but I don't believe it. Mike's been an extremely loyal and very, very good vice president. He's the guy they bring into the Hill to help, close deals and get things done because he has good relationships on the Hill. So I think he helps the president govern very well. So, I've heard these things, but that's just typical DC speculation. So I don't think so.
All right. I'm going to take that as authoritative, despite what you said. We're going to get to your record and some of the things that you've written about in just a moment, but I have to ask you a couple questions on impeachment, which seems like it was ages ago, but was just a month ago or whatever it was, faded quickly. First, you were picked as vice president by Mitt Romney. You know him well. Mm-hmm. I think you all got along very, very well during the campaign.
He's a good friend of mine.
What is your view of the fact that he was the only Republican in either house to vote for even one article of impeachment?
Look, Mitt's a good friend of mine. I think it was just purely a conscience vote. It is what he said it was when he made that vote, when he gave his speech. So that's just who Mitt is. And I don't agree with the vote. I actually don't think this was impeachable. You got to remember, a lot of people don't think of it like this. Impeachment's a political process. It's a political decision. It is not a judicial process. It has the veneer of a judicial process in the Senate, but it's not a judicial process. It's a political process. And if it's a political process, you have to make a decision. Is this rise to the level of not just negating the last election, all your constituents, but preventing the next one? The Iowa caucus had already occurred. So voting is already underway in the presidential election. Everybody knows all the facts. You saw I'm not one of the people who thinks it was a perfect phone call, but you saw the transcripts, you know the facts, so the people know, they have the information in front of them. And so I don't think you should remove a person from the ballot and deny them the right to make their decision on who the next president's going to be. So that is what most Republicans see. And I'm not in office, I have a free hand, but that's just how I see it. Mitt saw it a different way, and it's a conscience vote. As Speaker, you're in charge of passing an agenda, whipping votes, getting people to vote. I never held a conscience vote against a person. If a person is taking a vote that you don't want, but it's because of conscience, you just leave them alone. That's why they were sent to Congress in the first place. So he took a conscience vote, but I think most Republicans saw it the way I just described it as I see it, that it just didn't rise to that level of an impeachable offense.
You had a long spell in Congress, and you came in at the very end of the century and left in early 2019. And during that relatively short period, 20 years is long or short, however you want to interpret it, there were 2 impeachments.
You just dated yourself by saying that.
I think people know already. Just take a look. But you were there.
I came in the beginning of Clinton's impeachment.
Clinton's impeachment, and now Trump's impeachment, a Democrat and a Republican. Is this going to be a regular part of our politics and our partisanship?
I'm afraid so, quite possibly. Yeah, I think it's been cheapened and demeaned a bit. I think Nancy made a decision based on how to govern her caucus. And the kind of decisions and the way she set it up was more about caucus management than anything else. And that delivered a product, an impeachment process, that on our side of the aisle, we don't see it as having been fair. We saw it as more partisan, and therefore the outcome was predictable. When she announced the process, instead of actually voting on the process, which is typically how it's done, you actually bring a procedure to the floor in a resolution and pass it. Mm-hmm. When she chose not to do that, which to us that meant she was just trying to protect her moderates for as long as she could, it was already political to begin with. So when she started it that way, that was the completed process. It's become more of a political weapon. Now there are people who strongly feel the other way, and that's their conscience. But I think this process was more politicized. They're always politicized, but this was a very political one. And I think this is unfortunately going to become probably more of a regular tool than it should ever be used as. It wasn't what Hamilton and the framers, just considered something that we should do on a regular basis. But I worry that could be the case.
Maybe every time there's a House of Representatives controlled by one party, opposite to the party controlling the White House.
I think it blew up in their face. Look at the numbers. Look at Quinnipiac. I think it actually helped the president. So, and I'm sure that wasn't Nancy's goal, but look at it this way. If you're thinking politically, she did this because her caucus was demanding it at the time, and she's very focused on her caucus, and that's what leaders do. But at the same time, you basically gave hope and rise to the Democrat base, only to squash their feelings because you failed, and then you just agitated and galvanized the Republican base. And that is the result of all of this, and that is why I think this is, if you had to just pick a side, it's accruing to the president's benefit. Now, it's bad for the country, it's just hyper-polarized the nation, but at the end of the day, I think it blew up in her face. So maybe people will think twice a little bit more before doing it again.
And actually, it blew up in the Republicans' face during Clinton.
That's when I came in. So we lost, how many seats? We shrunk. 6 seats, So I came in a bad year. It was funny, in my district, so my district was I replaced Les Aspin. You guys remember Les Aspin? He was Clinton's Secretary of Defense. And then there was a guy for 2 terms who barely won, and then I came in. So I was coming in a Democrat district, and and Newt Gingrich was running the show at the time, and they were running all these impeachment ads across the country. Remember that Harry and Louise kind of like impeachment ad? Or was these people talking about how do they talk to their kids about impeachment. They ran these ads. I was watching my poll numbers going like this. And so they ran NRCC, which is the House arm. They were running these impeachment ads, and my numbers were going like this. And then they finally saw that they were driving me into the ground. They stopped making it about impeachment in my particular district, and my numbers came back up. And so what happened was Newt he basically tried to make it about impeachment, and we lost a bunch of seats. We barely hung onto our majority, and that was the lesson. So it blew up in our faces. And what happened? Clinton was running in a good economy. Those of you who are young weren't around this, but think of what you thought about Bill Clinton at the time. You liked the economy at the time in 1998. And so this is kind of similar. So our party, this is when I was running for Congress, were seen as overreaching for enacting a partisan impeachment against a president who people didn't like personally. Not everybody, a lot of people didn't like personally, but he had a great economy. And what happened? He whooped us.
By the way, Harry and Louise have been divorced.
Yeah.
In case you know they were unhappy. But no, the point you make is very good. And having two lessons, one Democrat and one Republican,
exactly,
may actually help. Although
maybe it will reduce the incidence of impeachments in the future. I don't know.
You came into politics, staffing and being involved right from the beginning, but you were also there at a time when, yes, things were partisan. They're always partisan. They have to be partisan. It's how our system is organized. But there were many instances when the two parties came together in the national interest. That, I'm not going to say it never happens, but it almost never happens anymore. How could we reverse this, or is it possible? It
does, and it can happen. This is the point I try to make. So I think we have a new 21st century digital entertainment age, and we have two wings of the parties. We have an entertainment wing of the Democratic Party. We have an entertainment wing of the Republican Party. And these entertainment wings are the ones that compete for our hearts and our minds, and they basically fill our space in that they fill our Twitter feeds, they fill our Facebook feeds, our digital, our radio, our cable, and then we as citizens go hang out in our own little cul-de-sac to get our positive reinforcement of our views. This wasn't like that when I started in politics. We didn't really even have the internet, frankly. We didn't have all of this stuff.
Al Gore hadn't invented it.
So Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. So it was less polarizing, and there was less of a huge monetary incentive to polarize. So my biggest fear of our politics of the day is we've digitized and weaponized and incentivized identity politics on the right and the left. And so that's going to tear us apart. But let me just give you, and I don't know if you're going to get into this, your questions, but the last session of Congress, not this particular one, the last one, the one I just completed, was the most productive session of Congress in a generation. And so everybody uses different metrics in their professions. In the House, we basically measure ourselves based on how many pieces of legislation do we produce. How many bills do you mark up in committee and bring through the process and get to the floor? Usually it's about 500-600 in a 2-year term. We did 1,175 bills in the last session of Congress in 2017, 2018. Over half of those made it through the Senate, through the filibuster, into law. Over 80% of those bills were bipartisan bills. So the problem is nobody knows this. And why does no one know that the most productive session in Congress, since what they tell me is since Reagan's first term, with over 80% of its product being bipartisan, why does nobody know that? Because none of that stuff sells. None of that stuff is good for MSNBC or Fox or talk radio, having us yelling at each other, screaming at each other's throats. But nevertheless, we did a whole host of things that got done that solved problems, but nobody knows about it because it doesn't have us at each other's throats. You know about the controversial stuff. More importantly, you know more about the tweets. You know more about the name calling, the personality stuff, but not about the actual production. Now, with impeachment, it ground the system to a halt. And then when you're in a presidential year, the system grinds to it. I mean, heck, half the Senate's running for president, or at least was. So that system kind of locks down, but in the off year, meaning the off cycle, we had enormous production, bipartisan, just recently, but nobody knows about it because it doesn't sell. So my point to you, Larry, is these institutions still work. I mean, the founder, one of the architects of this great system we have, and I believe our system is better than the parliamentary systems to withstand the stress tests democracy is experiencing right now. I think our system, our bicameral system with its separate co-equal branches of government, is far better equipped to withstand the challenges that democracy is experiencing internally, like I described, and also from the illiberal regimes like the Russians and the Chinese who are trying to, disrupt us and undermine us. I think our system is better designed, and just a year and a half ago, we were passing a lot of stuff that a lot of Democrats also voted for that, improve people's lives.
Was any news organization or television outlet better than others in terms of reporting?
I'm on the board of Fox, so for full disclosure,
That's fine. The president doesn't like Fox either.
Yeah, I know. I think he tweeted against me last night on this.
Neil Cavuto, last night.
Look, I get up and read the Wall Street Journal. I've always found, the way I see it is, Speaker, you do 2 press conferences a week. You kind of get to know people in the media who strive to stay down the fairway and who strive to get things accurately and who don't have sort of a biased narrative. There's narrativizing in the media, and then there's people who just try to objectively report the news. And I'd say in each of these major outlets are people who do that. So frankly, and I'm not going to throw names out there, but if there's a byline in the Post or the Times or the Wall Street Journal or Politico or The Hill, and I know the person, I always felt like that person really tries to get it right. Because if you're in the news-making business and you're consuming the news, you can sometimes see that is misleading, that's not accurate, that's half true, or that's an attempt at accuracy. There's still a fair amount of people who are attempting accuracy, but more and more these days, and I think it's because of the competitive nature of media, newspapers, look, Facebook and Google are just eating their ad revenue. There's such a competition for hits and clicks and ratings that it drives to this narrativizing. It drives to having algorithms that feed your audience whatever it takes to get the ratings and to stay alive and survive. And that sort of throws objective journalism out the window. So that's the new challenge these days.
I think your description is absolutely correct, but I come back again and ask, what can we do about it? Because I've encountered so many people on both sides of the aisle, and independents as well, who are so frustrated and unhappy. What can we do as individuals or as groups? Well,
there are people like my friend Jonah Goldberg and Steve Hayes. They're right of center guys. They're launching a web business to try and do this. Now it'd be center right, but they'll be clear. This is editorializing. This is objective. I'd like to think that there is a demand in the media space for a product that does do this, and we'll see.
Well, I hope they both succeed. They're terrific people, and I hope others follow them because we need more of this. Look, I'm going to go to your 2014 book, The Way Forward, Renewing the American Idea, which I've been told is a wonderful holiday gift. Any holiday. And I normally don't push anybody's books but mine. But I just wanted to mention yours. We should have had it here. Again, that's the staff's fault. You discuss
I did write it like 6 years ago, but yeah.
Well, it's come back into vogue.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
what you're supposed. You add a new afterword, that works. You talked about how formative and even difficult your youth was. Can you, because I think it would relate to some of the young people that I know who are in here, who have had difficult circumstances. How did it affect you? How did you use it to spur you to the kind of political success you've had?
Well, you know why God invented whiskey, don't you?
I'm not sure.
To keep the Irish from running the world, and it's working so far.
I'm glad you said that.
So yeah, look, I'm an Irish guy, so I can say it. So it didn't spare my family either. So my dad had some issues with that I'm the youngest of 4 by a lot, and so my dad died when I was in high school, and he had struggled with alcohol. So then I got really close with my mom, and my mom's mom, my grandma, ended up moving in with us because she had Alzheimer's. So my mom and I were her primary caregivers. At the same time, when I was in high school, my mom went back to college to Madison, to Wisconsin. We live about 45 miles south of Madison. She'd get on a bus and go to school. we had this really nice lady named Rita Rorty who just passed away, who'd come and take care of my grandma during the day, and then I'd get home from school and take care of my grandma, and my mom would get home late from college. So I just basically had a non-typical high school experience, which made me grow up really fast. And it also made me, I could either wallow in self-pity or just get on it. And the way I described it back then to myself was I'd either sink or swim, so I just better swim. So I just had to step it up, I had my dad's buddy, young man, put his hand on my shoulder at the reception for my dad's funeral, saying, "You cannot be a burden to your mother. You've got to be," it's pretty tough stuff. This is back in 1986. And it really penetrated me. And basically I decided I'm not going to make life hard for my mom. I'm going to be her, I'm going to be her friend. And it made me grow up really fast. And it gave me a good sense of life is short and precious. You better make the most of it because you never know what's happening. My dad died of a heart attack at 55, my grandfather at 57, my great-grandfather at 59. So Ryan male hasn't lived to the age of 60 since we came from Ireland to America. So I've always had this sort of sense of, I retired from being speaker because our kids were going into high school and I just didn't want to not know them. So you're on the road like 5 days a week when you're Speaker of the House. So it always gave me a sense of urgency. So the last point I'll make that may be helpful to young people here is I then grew up with mentors because when you have a void in your life, you got to fill it, and having mentors is really helpful. You mentor all these you live right there, right? Yeah. So you probably mentor these kids. What are those dorms called? The single units?
The lawn rooms.
The lawn rooms, yeah. Rooms. I'm sure they probably come by and ask you for advice now and then. That's really important.
No, they're afraid of me.
They're afraid.
They don't come by.
Well, okay, do it anyway. So I always had mentors. I had mentors throughout life, college. Jack Kemp was my mentor. I was Jack's staff economics guy. And I thought I wanted to be an economist, and I was going to go to Milwaukee and be like the chief economist at R.W. Baird. That was sort of my vision for my life when I was young. And Jack Kemp sucked me into politics and sucked me into public policy as a vocation. And that mentorship nurtured me and kind of got me going. So,
how did it happen? Now, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And he was a wonderful mentor for anybody. But how did it happen? How did you connect with him?
So I wanted to study economics, and I also was interested in political science because I just had an interest in it. So I went out to DC for a semester at this American University semester program they have. And in that, it requires an internship. So I got an internship with my home state guy, Bob Kasten, a senator from Wisconsin at the time. He's the guy that was before Feingold. They offered me a paid internship for the summer, which was kind of cool. So I waited tables at a restaurant called Tortilla Coast on Capitol Hill, interned there, and lived with 3 other guys in a 1-bedroom apartment at Van Ness UDC. And, made money. Back then, student loans were pretty affordable. So, I racked up debt, but I paid off all my loans, probably 5 years out of college, which I don't think you can do it like that these days. But I then went to work for Kasten out of school as an economic researcher on one of his committees, thinking, I'll go learn public finance, and that will help me get into the University of Chicago's doctoral program, which is where I wanted to go. I'm a conservative guy. I believe in the classical school of economics, the Austrian school of economics. Right. So I wanted to go study at Chicago because they had the best of the best there. It's where Milton Friedman and Bob Mundell and Gary Becker and all these guys were. And Kasten loses to Feingold. Then Jack Kemp's starting this brand new think tank called Empower America to be sort of the shadow government to Clinton. And he asked Bob Kasten, I'm looking for a young economics guy I wasn't a PhD economist, a young economics guy to be my staffer. He's like, I got just the guy for you. So he sent me into Kemp, and I ended up sort of abandoning my grad school plans and working for Jack Kemp on all of his issues, enterprise zones, the gold standard, tax policy, and just loved it. And it's just, he had this infectious enthusiasm that breathed life into public policy. I would go tour public housing places with like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Homes in Chicago, and just I watched Jack Kemp proselytize what I guess I would call classical liberal conservatism, free market supply side, upward mobility, inclusive, optimistic conservatism, which is the brand I like. And It just became really it was infectious enthusiasm, and it got me to decide I want to spend at least my early life in public policy, because what I learned was, and this is to the young folks here, you can make a huge difference in this country at a young age. It's uncanny how in this nation you can really do this, and you can advocate for ideas, get passion for your principles, and you can actually work I was a staffer on Capitol Hill. You can work in government and help get things into law and see it make a difference in people's lives. That's really gratifying. So Kemp taught me that. He taught me public policy as a vocation. Working on the things you believe in, seeing it make a difference is a very gratifying calling. And so I didn't, so I abandoned my idea of, sort of working in the field of economics and moving back to Wisconsin and just did this. And then when the congressional seat opened up in my hometown, which was a Democrat seat, so it wasn't like a real crowded Republican field, I asked Jack if it passed the laugh test if I went home and ran, and he said, I'm going to write you the first check and I'll go campaign with you. So, kind of what happened. And I ended up winning.
And then I'm going to ask you about that in just a second, but I know you made a lot of sacrifices. You're not from a wealthy background. But one really stuck out. I did not know this. To become Speaker of the House, you gave up a 7-year plan for a PhD in economics. I don't know whether that was a good trade-off. You'll have to be the judge of that. Anyway, we were talking about this earlier, and I really want not just the young people, but all of us to hear what life is really like as a congressman, not from a wealthy background, because everybody's not a billionaire, which is something I hear from everybody all the time, or multimillionaire. What's it like? I don't think you ever had, while you were a congressman at least, an apartment of your own. You slept on your couch the couch in the office for a while.
Yeah, I lived in a group house with Pat Toomey and Ted Poe. Pat's a current senator from Pennsylvania. Ted retired. He was a Houston House member. So I did the group house thing for 4 years, I think, Kevin? 4 years. What I learned was I'm never there. I mean, I go to the gym at 6, I work till about 11:30 at night. I didn't even eat a meal at the place, so what was the point? So I ended up moving into my office, kind of ahead of the curve. Dick Armey had done it at the time. Right. And so I just got a cot. I'm a little tall, so I had to get one of those extra long. You can go to hotelsupply.com. If you have like one of those roller beds you bring in for your kids, I bought one of those things, and one of those long ones, and I just put it in my closet and I folded it out and I slept in my office. And frankly, I added a half-hour sleep to my regimen. About 100 people do that now. I mean, some people think it's weird, but for me, it was just really efficient because I work late, get up, go to the gym, shower there. The gym's in the basement of the Rayburn building, and then just go on with my day. So I did that for about 16 years, 15, 16 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Very few people could manage that. And when you're on the road, I was talking to your assistant Kevin, who's been with you a long time, and he was explaining really for not just your years as Speaker, but even as Budget Committee Chair and before then, you would have 4 or 5 events a day, and if anything, you'd get back to Wisconsin for maybe Sunday to say hello to the kids in case they'd forgotten what you looked like.
Yeah, that's basically why I retired. As a regular member of Congress, you're home on recesses doing your district activities. And when we took the majority back over in the 2010 election, I made sure I put myself on this committee to decide the calendar, because I was, we were raising a family in Cantor, Eric Cantor from around this area, and I and Kevin McCarthy helped design the calendar so that you could work your district, have a family life, and productive DC sessions. So we wanted 4 days in DC, and we start Tuesdays or Mondays. So it'd go Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. And that you would stagger it so that you could always have a weekday in your district with your constituents, but weekends at home with your family, and then recesses the whole time. So, and the Democrats like this schedule so much, that's the one thing they kept in this majority, is they maintained our schedule. And it works pretty well. But if you're a rank and file member, it's not bad. And if you live on this side of the Mississippi, it was like a 3.5-hour commute for me It's not terrible. I'd fly from O'Hare to here, and to Reagan. It's pretty easy. If you're on the West Coast, it's much harder. But when you become Speaker of the House, it's totally different because you have to do all the fundraising for the party for your caucus's reelection. And so you're basically, if you're not in DC, you're somewhere in America, not your home. And then I would come home and I still was a congressman from Wisconsin, so I'd spend my Saturdays in the district running around Racine, Kenosha, Lake Geneva, Janesville, Milwaukee suburbs, and then just home on Sundays. And, our kids are in high school, and I didn't want, it's my own childhood. I didn't want to not know my kids, and I was still alive. So I didn't want to be that guy who my kids I was single when I got elected in 28. I got married after my first term, started having kids. So my kids knew nothing other than me being in Congress, typically gone on weekdays. So I just didn't want them to grow up not really knowing me. So that was to me the big pressure point to step out and get out of it. And I'm so glad I did. I mean, timing's everything, but I mean, I'm glad I did because my daughter's a senior and our sons are freshmen and sophomore in high school. I'm deeply involved in their lives now. And I have the kind of family life that I always wish I had that I finally now do have. So that's the trade-off in Congress is just time away from your family.
And that's, I think, really a typical story, not
It's
for
a typical
speaker,
story.
but for
Yeah.
most
Right.
congressmen, at least in the majority. I think
Correct.
they have.
Yeah, you're much busier in the majority than you are in the minority.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, of course, there was a shift. You mentioned the timing issue, and you certainly have an excellent sense of timing by retiring in 2018. But you had a major shift in the House, and you knew a lot of it was coming. We've got a very different speaker now. And I know you don't want to criticize your successor, but she was also one of your predecessors. So maybe you can criticize her in that role. And I'm sure the press will make a distinction there.
Take it forward. I'm a Republican, so right. So no, I don't wish Nancy any ill will. I know her really well. What's your question?
Well, the question, you can just run with it, but I was going to ask you for your evaluation of her style as speaker compared to your style, because they clearly were very different.
Very different. The best thing I had going for me is I never asked for the job and I didn't have to keep the job. So that's really unique. Almost everybody in leadership, I was a policy guy and I wanted to be the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and I had achieved that, and that's what I was. So in Congress, you do one of two tracks. You do the policy track, go become a committee chair in the committee of your jurisdiction, the issue area you really care about. If you like national security, go be the chair of the Armed Services Committee. It'll take you a career to get there, but you can get there. I was an economics guy, so I went and was chair of budget, then chair of Ways and Means. That's what I want. That's why I never ran for the Senate. I just wanted to do that. When Boehner had to leave, sort of under duress, right after the beginning of the term, and I supported Kevin to get it, but he didn't have the votes for it, I got drafted into the job. And I took it willingly and joyfully, and it was meaningful, and I enjoyed it. But all the members knew I didn't ask for this job, and I didn't need to keep it. I was okay if I did, because then if I didn't keep it, then I'd go back to having like a normal family life. So that was the best thing that I had going for me, because members could only push me so far, and they didn't want to blow up the majority of the speakership again, because they had just done that with Boehner. Nancy has the opposite problem. So she wants it very badly. She almost didn't get it this last time. Remember all those freshmen running, I'm not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi? So she was coming in to the majority with a serious threat on not being able to maybe get the vote, because, I don't know, a couple dozen people ran pledging not to vote for her.
Right.
So when people who are on the edges of your caucus know this, they will use that against you. And so I think she makes decisions based on winning the next speaker's vote. And that is what I think led her into this impeachment gamut. I think her first instincts were the right ones, which was, it's not going to be successful. It won't bode well for us politically. So we shouldn't do it unless it's really bipartisan. And obviously it wasn't. But I think, so to her credit, she really focuses on her caucus. I remember when Louise Slaughter died, she was really shaken by that, because she was pretty tight with Louise. So she's very focused on her members. She knows their causes and their concerns and who they are. But also at the same time, I think she more focuses on what do I need to do to keep my vote coalition to be speaker, not what's the right smart decision to make. And I think that's the issue. I think you motivate people through incentive and motivation and inspiration, I think she plays more of a machine political game and more of an intimidation game. And I just never, that's just not my style, and I just don't, at least for Republicans, it doesn't work. And so I think she's from that kind of school of thought. She's from that Baltimore, machine political school of thought. So I think she runs it more like a machine, and she wants the job so badly that she'll make decisions probably not in the interest of her party to keep the job.
She is a lot like her father, who was mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to bring this up. When you were speaker, of course, all of us watch all the State of the Union addresses, and well, most of them.
I never ripped up a speech.
Yeah, I was getting to that.
Yeah.
I just remember you were always very well-mannered. And you had that stone face on, which normally speakers have, and even vice presidents. They're not jumping up all the time and applauding. We know what just happened. And we know why. Trump is a divider, not a uniter, and Democrats are overwhelmingly, intensely negative about Trump. So I don't know if it hurt her in her party, but when that happened, when she, right after the State of the Union, tore up the speech, what was your reaction? And what do you think that has done to either her speakership or to the polarization we were talking about?
Well, it did nothing but add to that. Look, as soon as she didn't read the script, I knew she's in a foul mood. I actually watched it. You watch State of the Unions. I participated in 20 of them. And I sat there for, 4 of them. So there's a specific script that's been read for, 100 and some years. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor and privilege to present to you the Honorable President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. So there's a script you read. She said, ladies and gentlemen, President of the United States. So it was clear she was already in a foul mood, and she was not going to read what has been read forever. So it was, when she started that, I'm like, okay, this is, already off to a pretty bad start. I always felt like you just got to poker face it, because whether it was Obama or Trump, I'd sit there, and I felt like if you do something to bring attention to yourself, it's sort of disrespecting the moment in the speech. So just be poker face and do nothing. Stand at the right time, clap at the right time, and otherwise don't do anything. That's just what I thought was good manners, more or less. He just got under her skin so much, that
he does that.
I know, but it's my point I made earlier. I'm sure her caucus loved it. I'm sure it played to her base and her caucus extremely well. It didn't do her any favors. It helped Trump. It helped us. No. It galvanized our support. So, again, maybe it was good for caucus politics. Maybe it was good for her base, but it wasn't good for the institution, and it wasn't good for her party writ large, in my opinion.
Well, I think the polls have pretty much borne you out on that. I'm going to wind up with this question, so I'm telling you to take as long as you'd like on it. And it's very personal, so that I don't think you'll have any problem or get into any trouble about this. I checked it with Kevin. He said it was fine.
How long is Tony Bennett's contract? Because we want to get back to Madison.
There you go. I knew you were going to work that in. Yeah. No, I suspect we'd give him the rotunda to keep him here. So I'm thinking about your future, because you're a young guy. I mean, you've had 20 years in Congress. You had 3+ years as Speaker, which is second in line to the presidency. It's right after Vice President. A lot of people don't focus on that. And didn't you have a 24-hour detail?
Yeah. It's called continuity of government. It's COG. Yeah. So you have to preserve succession. You have that, and the Senate Pro Tem has a 24-hour detail as well.
Well, that could be fun or maybe not. Depends on the circumstances. But you've got a long life in front of you, and of course your kids will go to college, and like most young people here, won't ever want to see their parents again, or at least for a long period of time. Is there any chance that you would come back into either elective or appointive office, and what might attract you?
I just don't know the answer to that. I'm so focused on the next 4 years. Our youngest is a 9th grader. I am just so focused on that phase of our family's life. I feel like I'm making up for a lot of lost time. I've been staying away from TV. I put myself in a self-imposed media moratorium for a year. I'm really seriously considering renewing it for another year, because it's been very pleasant, actually. No offense to media, but I've just really enjoyed. I teach at Notre Dame. I'm a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a think tank that I agree with. I've got a charitable foundation on center-right poverty ideas that's called the American Idea Foundation. I want to make sure some of the laws I worked on writing, like opportunity zones, impact bonds, evidence-based policy, which is a poverty idea, gets executed well. So I have cool vocational things I'm doing right now, all wrapped around our family schedule. And frankly, I'm just focused on that right now, and I'm not looking. I never was one of those guys who looked beyond. I never, like, Ways and Means was about the only thing I ever really shot for that I really wanted, and because it was a policy perch to do policy. So my policy ambitions are really big, but my political ambitions have never been all that big. So I just don't know. I'm not trying to dodge your question. You never say never to things, but I have no plans in the next 4 years to do anything other than what I'm doing now, because I am really enjoying this time of getting my kids through high school. And, I cooked elk hamburger helper last night. It's great, So, I get to do stuff like that I could never do before. So,
There are a lot better things than hamburger helper. We need
Well,
to talk. We need to talk
yeah.
about that. Kevin, that was a great answer. I don't think it'll get him in trouble at all. So he was worried. He was worried about what I was going to do. You've given us so many relaxed, relevant, and revealing answers. You really have. And I rarely say anything good about anybody in public office. But you really have. I've learned in listening to you, and I know that the young people in particular, and maybe some of the people in my age category, have as well. And I personally, I hope you stay. You already are continuing to be active in public affairs, but any opportunity you have, I hope you can get on the public stage. Maybe not so much on TV. I agree with you. In this era, oh God, you can't win. But in other ways, you've still got a lot to give. And listening to you, I can see that's true. So on behalf of all of us who are worried and who are concerned and who think that democracy is under great stress, we need more people like you who actually have an approach that, while is policy and ideologically based, is also open to other ideas and working with other people. I ask all of you to join me. I know you're as happy and impressed with him as I am. Please join me in giving a very hearty hand to Speaker Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool place.
Yeah, we're going to go to the.
Yeah, thank you.
You got another little session in studio.
Yeah, right.
Good.
Yeah, cool.
Okay,
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
Right down the street?
Down there, all right. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'm going to go
Thanks.
over here so I don't get in the way.
Nice to see you.